What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to another day here in the MC Parks server. And today we're taking a look in the Magic Kingdom at Tomorrowland. Now, this is an easy one for me to start this series because I love Tomorrowland. Tomorrowland is a land that I think is misunderstood, and I kind of wonder the direction from Disney, what they're going to do with this land, because I think the reason it's in an identity crisis is really for a lot of reasons. A lot of people have talked about how, especially Tomorrowland is so. When you talk about the future and you make attractions on the future, and you have to remember, the the R&D for these types of things, right? Like the Magic Kingdom and making theme park rides and things like that. It takes years for the research and development to kind of come to fruition. So by the time they research the project, they create a backstory, they figure out how the ride's going to work, what kind of ride is it going to be, and they do all the details like that and actually get to building the attraction. By the time the attraction is built and actually opened, a lot of things, especially when you talk about temporary things like the future, the version of the future that when Disney World opened and the Magic Kingdom opened is totally different from what we think of like Future World or Tomorrowland today. And it's funny I actually said Future World, kind of kind of throwing that one up, because that's a problem with Epcot too. Is just how temporary, what is the future? And Tomorrowland is a really, unfortunately, a good example of just, maybe a cheap, opportunistic, um, very positive outlook on the future. And I think a lot of people today, and especially in the 21st century, are very negative on the future. And especially today in 2024 with AI and what the future of AI could be, it's much more dark and cynical than maybe what they kind of thought of what Tomorrowland would be in the 70s and the 80s when the Magic Kingdom opened and kind of updates were made. Now, the Tomorrowland has a really interesting history. I could go through every single attraction here, and there have been multiple iterations of attractions in all of these areas. Um, so I'm going off the cusp here. I'm going off the top of my head from what I remember. So if you guys have any kind of conditions to throw out there, definitely let me know. But just starting off here down the main avenue when you enter Tomorrowland from the hub, right here, this is the most recent inhabitant was Stitch. This was Stitch's Great Escape, and it's no longer open to the public. It's no longer an attraction. Um, Obviously, it has a very rich history, this building, a lot of controversy. And the first thing is really, the first attraction here was, I think it was Flight to the Moon. And once we got, and this is kind of the epitome example of, kind of Tomorrowland is, the second this attraction opened, and within 5 years of, Flight to the Moon, well, then we landed on the moon. And then it became, well, okay, so now we've been there, done that. Well, now the Tomorrowland theme of Flight to the Moon is now reality. So they changed it out, and I will preface this was a Circle Vision attraction. So if you look that up, it's basically just a circle theater with seats surrounding the middle, which everyone's focused on looking in the middle of the attraction. I apologize for not saying that earlier. And eventually they put in Mission to Mars, and eventually in the 90s, Eisner comes in wanting more of a teenage theme to the area, and eventually this became Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter, and everyone remembers that. And that was I wish I got to see that ride, but I'm kind of scared of horror, I will admit. So I think I would have been one of the people that would have been scared. And to be honest with you, as a kid, which we're going to get to in a minute, eventually Extraterrestrial closed in, I want to say 2004, and became Stitch's Great Escape. And it was from Stitch's Great Escape from pretty much 2006, 2005, all the way to 2020. It became seasonal, and as we know, if you're a Disney buff, you would know once it becomes seasonal, that's usually the last writing on the wall before the attraction closes. And we've since seen pictures of Skippy and other animatronics like Stitch being ripped apart and gutted. So this attraction will never reopen. And now it's a matter of, are they going to put in Wreck-It Ralph, Incredibles? They're going to do something with it. And I actually did cry on Stitch. I'll admit it. I was like 10 years old. So Stitch does make people cry. This is another attraction here. It's now Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. It used to be, I think it was Timekeeper. So Timekeeper used to be here for a long time, eventually becoming Monsters Inc. And that one didn't get as much, much of a thrashing as Stitch did, because I think, the Timekeeper was a nice attraction, but people weren't as invested in it as Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter. So over here, of course, is Buzz Lightyear, and it's not, unfortunately, it's not open here on MC Magic. But that's Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin. That used to be Delta Dream Flight and If You Had Wings. So those were two sponsored attractions back in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then I think it was 96, eventually turning into what we have today in Buzz Lightyear. I talked about this in my Magic Kingdom kind of tour, but this used to be the Tomorrowland Theater back here, no longer there. And I kind of talked about how this whole area really could get demolished and just turned into something else, because you have this kind of very temporary looking cheap theater, the Carousel of Progress, and what used to be the Tomorrowland Theater, which is now cast parking. So with all this space, and you consider, if you want to make it even bigger, Buzz Lightyear, right? Buzz Lightyear is here. You already have a Toy Story Land in Hollywood Studios. You don't really need that. And the much maligned Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor, for better or for worse, I don't think that's a very big attraction. And this is open here with Stitch. There is so much you can do with this area. So I would say right now with Tomorrowland, I would say keep TTA, keep People Mover, keep Tron, even keep Space Mountain, and close everything else. And I love the Carousel of Progress as much as the next person, but there's gonna come a day where this attraction is going to close. And I hate to say that, because I make an effort out of my way to go on Carousel of Progress every time I go, but I do think it's gonna come a point where that attraction has to close. And to make it even bigger, you really want to go big here, right? Let's say you shut down Space Mountain, do a full-on refurbishment, completely update it, make it more of a Tomorrowland theme. And some people might say, well, you want to keep that 80s optimistic theme, right? Which I agree with, but update it, right? Make it a little bit more like the one in Disneyland and Disneyland Paris. I know some people think those are maligned, but I do like those versions, to be honest with you. And I think they could blend the mix enough to really redo Space Mountain and make it a really nice, a nice little update, without really taking away from the essence of what makes that attraction what it is. And then, of course, keep Tron. But even if you were to blow up the Speedway, get rid of the Speedway, because again, that's kind of what happened with Mission to the Moon, or Flight to the Moon, right? As they were building this, turnpikes and big highways were a big deal. That was a Tomorrowland concept when the Magic Kingdom opened. But today, it's just normal. It's normal everyday life for us. So if you got rid of this, which is a huge plot of land, you got rid of this, you got rid of basically all of this stuff back here, you could have really redo the entirety of Tomorrowland, for better or for worse. And that's really cool how that spins like that. But I know I'm really torn, because I love Tomorrowland and I love what it was. But in 2024, it just seems so fragmented, and it just seems like they're trying to, like the reality is, especially with this attraction here with Stitch, right? Like the show building is basically two little theaters. There's not really much they can do with it. And kind of the same thing here with Monsters Inc. Like, yeah, you replace it, right? But what do you replace it with? Like, it's such a limited space. You're not putting a roller coaster. You're not putting a big dark ride in here. So it's one of those things where, as much as I love this entrance area and the buildings here, it makes it very hard to work with. It's not easy to really figure out what to do with. And, Space Ranger Spin, you could close this and make this part of the whole back area expansion and you have much more room, but I don't know. I think it would be easier to actually, if you were to close Buzz Lightyear and Monsters Inc., you could put a, I mean, we already have a Buzz Lightyear dark ride, but imagine all the space if you used like Monsters Inc. as the queue for like sort of a mega attraction, almost like they did with Ellen, right? Like you take the show building for Ellen, turn it into the queue. You could do that with Monsters Inc. and then make a really good immersive quality attraction in Tomorrowland, right? And as much as people like the Buzz Lightyear merch and things like that, like I don't know. I think they have so much to do already in Toy Story Land. Like I don't know. I think it's something they could do something better with this area. And of course, this whole area is open behind, right? You have the cast parking. So I just think there's so many missed opportunities with Tomorrowland that they could do more with. And I always forget Astro Orbiter. I actually haven't been on Astro Orbiter, but you could keep Astro Orbiter. I think that attraction really makes the kinetic energy of the land, right? You have it spinning around up there. It is really cool. That's a really nice piece of the land. Of course, going back in time, really the major update that happened to Tomorrowland, of course it opened in 1971 when the park opened, but the only time we saw a real full-on update was New Tomorrowland, or Tomorrowland 94. And that was in 1994. Michael Eisner brought an extraterrestrial, and they redid a lot of the theming of Tomorrowland, turning it into more of a like a steampunk Jules Verne version of Tomorrowland. And I'm actually quite happy with what they're doing with it now aesthetically in the Magic Kingdom. They're kind of going back in time, and I missed the old Tomorrowland sign. It was much more exciting at the front entrance here than what they have now. But this version reminds me, like, see, that kind of looks like something you would see in The Incredibles. This Tomorrowland sign is very Incredibles-like, in my opinion. So maybe they'll do something with The Incredibles. I mean, I don't know. But they recently redid this, right? These rocks all used to be like Mars colored, like red and orange, and like I said, more of like that Jules Verne steampunk version. And that was in 1994. Like I said, extraterrestrial alien encounter came in. That was really the flagship attraction in this update. But there was so many other things that were going to happen back here. There was actually going to be a time where they were actually going to they were going to replace Carousel of Progress for a show, a like kind of space themed show with like space aliens, similar if you know America Sings in Disneyland. It would have been something similar to that, and I'll do a full video on that at some point in the future. But that is our review of Tomorrowland. I'm really, I think we've been saying this for a really long time now, is, when are we going to start to see some kind of investing and some money put into Tomorrowland? And they are starting to do that with kind of the new signage with Laugh Floor and what's left of Stitch's Great Escape, and, taking down that old theming and turning it back to what it looked like in the 70s, which I actually think is a good direction. I'm really excited for Tomorrowland's future. I want to see something different here. And as much as I love Tomorrowland, I love Space Mountain, I love Tron, I love the TTA, it doesn't need help here. It just seems like there's just so much and that's why when people say like, Disney needs to open up a fifth park and things like that, they need to redo this. They need to fix Tomorrowland in the Magic Kingdom. And it's projects like this that, when they talk about building a fifth park, these are the things they need to fix first. Because you have really prime real estate here in the Magic Kingdom, in Tomorrowland. You could gut this entire side of Tomorrowland. You could re-put a new ride in Stitch's Great Escape. That's just sitting empty. They need to do stuff with the space they already have before they expand. And it seems like recently Disney's trend has been closing attractions and not really putting anything new in them. And, I think that's a really poor direction to go in. It's hurting the brand. It's hurting the kind of people's reputation of what is supposed to be such a mega theme park. And unfortunately, it might take something like less attendance at the Magic Kingdom and maybe Epic Universe being the leader in kind of the theme park industry in Orlando is having the highest attendance, maybe that will force Disney to say, we need to redevelop our park. Because if people aren't going to Magic Kingdom, we need to do some things. And the problem with that is, well, now you're basically closing off the entirety of, you're closing off Tomorrowland while Epic Universe is doing its thing in Universal. It's just going to feed that much more attention and much more market share to that park. And maybe that's the lack of foresight on Disney, but that's ultimately what I think will happen. And that might be the reactionary strategy of Disney coming in again, not realizing the market share they could lose from Universal, and maybe it takes Epic Universe for something like Tomorrowland to get a full facelift. So that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these videos. If you are, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Hopefully you enjoyed our tour through Tomorrowland. And if you guys have any ideas for Tomorrowland or video ideas and things like that, questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them. Thank you again, guys.